The following is a conversation with my teacher, Sean Tebor, formerly of Dragon Rising Yoga in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and who has a online platform called Embody Keys. He lives currently in Maui, in Hawaii, and is teaching movement there. He has a YouTube channel also called Embody Keys. It's just such an honor to talk with this incredibly gifted teacher that I so highly respect. He is one of my most forming teachers of my understanding of movement, my understanding of functionality in the body, and what needs to happen when we move, especially into extreme ranges of motion. He was a yoga teacher. He said he is not identifying as a yoga teacher anymore, and this has been a while. We're going into what stretch is and why we don't want to do it. We are talking about conscious body awareness. We're talking a lot about tone, about pushing and pulling, about engaging the whole system and not just tugging on one piece. We're talking a little bit about yoga and what should be disclosed at the beginning of your first yoga class as piece of informed consent, as a piece of these are the repercussions if you work out the way we want you to. And basically, it's really about, can you keep your body safe? Can you hold the space for your own body? And can your teacher hold the space for you as well to not cause injury or lasting harm and issues in the future? So I hope you enjoy. I would love to hear some feedback and comments if you are a yoga teacher or a conscious movement teacher. We would love to hear from you. And we both hope this is helpful for any human alive that is engaging in movement practice. Thank you so much, and enjoy.
I was called in to sub a couple of yoga classes, which I haven't done in a while, and they were hips and heart openers. And it was really great
Tell me more.
to go into yoga mode, like so to speak. It's
Do
always
it.
yoga mode,
Do
but
it.
yeah, and like also bring this tonal awareness that we'll be talking about today into and Jen, who owns the studio, she's pretty much up on pendiculation and counter rotation and tonal presence. It's pretty cool. But inviting people to like do some really weird things and bend and get all animal, and they were like, "Whoa!" And then the comment I get after class is like, "That was interesting," which is kind of a neutral response. I'm like,
Yeah,
"Okay,
it's like, well, I
yeah,
don't know what to do with this, but
it's
hey,
fine."
I moved.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
all good. It's like I'm not fishing for anything, but it's like they're like, "That's interesting. Maybe I'll come and try your class out." I'm like,
Well,
"Cool."
good. But I mean, it's like you have to expose people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and if you have a chance to sub it and to teach, and then people are like, oh, otherwise they would have never known what else is possible.
Yeah. So yeah, it was fun. It was just I think it was the timing was kind of perfect since we're doing this chat today and about whatever stretching is and is not and all of that and to be
Mhm.
in the yoga space. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Well, phone off then because yeah, what are we doing?
So, well, I think, well, we're going to talk about stretching, or why we don't want to really stretch our muscles, I guess, because I think it pertains to the yoga and the Pilates community, any movement community, dance, I think maybe even too. Um, and just to have put that out in the world.
Really wild. Because as you know, it's like been some time. It's like many years ago that we were at the yoga studio, Dragon Rising, and I was already like finding. Actually, it was when I started strength training, when I started doing gravity work. Makeshift trapezius using dowels and yoga straps from those
I
the
remember the little
little
space. Yeah.
yeah in the tiny space and like I want to do a pull up and how all of that was like healing things so quickly that I had never been able to touch in
Mhm.
the yoga. I could remain spacious, but that's not enough. And so I was like, whoa. And then, and as you remember, like that tonal awareness started translating into yoga class, and we
Yeah.
started bending everything. I think by and large, we sort of started to, I would say resist, but we just started to tone the poses, and we bent everything. And then we went towards straight, and then we recoiled back out of that and bent again and became more animal.
Wow.
Anyway, it's just really fascinating. So it's been a long time. And what's really fun now is it just continues to present itself in, you know, in the moment and relevant ways that are just deeper and deeper. Um, what it is to engage the full spectrum of engagement, of like the softest to the most radical commitment at the level of not just flesh but like the whole being. And what
Mhm.
does that do, and how it actually makes us more spacious. Like, what?
Totally,
But I'm
totally.
not surprised by that. Yeah, so when you go back and you look at, like tensegrity models, and
Yeah.
you look at Rolf, and you look at the collagen body, and you look at all of these things and how we're actually kind of like put together, not just in a physical way and chemical way and electrical way, but also a quantum way. Um, it's really about being organized. So anyway, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but
Yeah, yeah, no,
well,
we'll
so
we'll
what's
see
yeah.
where we're going with it. Yeah, 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 totally.
So what's happening, right, is that um, the gravitation towards a more tonified practice, no matter what it is, whether it's walking, whether it's gravity work on the gymnastics rings, or it's on a mat, or it's not on a mat, and it's just the embodied keys work that we do moving around on the ground. I'm finding that I'm just going to drop this a little bit. Like the fountain of youth really is in the remaining organized and toned properly through and through. Now, you can hear that, and people are like, okay, well, I go to the gym and I do my exercises, and that's great. But it's all about functional. Like, what does a functional human even look like these days? And we have these ideas of what's pretty, what's functional, what works, what doesn't work. But what I'm finding more and more is that when it comes to working with people, especially one on one, there's a propensity towards fix me, and
Mm,
there's a propensity towards like, they just want to get it fixed and move on and carry on with their life, and that's
mhm,
cool. I don't want to do that. I
mhm,
am kind of done doing that.
mhm,
But what it has done is it's shown me what function really is. So we need to take a look at how to define that, at least enough to set some kind of baseline for this conversation about stretching, because without it, we have to stay close to function, but that is very relational in gravity. So these primordial functions of push and pull, of what we could say contract and release, are always at play. And so let's go back again. So we're at the studio, and we're starting to get into this funky yoga that's being informed by the strength training, and it's starting to heal things. I have students coming up to me, and they're like, oh my God, my sacrum is finally stable after, like, I don't know how many years. And actually, I went through that myself from overstretching ligamentously at the sacral plexus during, binding and things like that in yoga, which is fun until it's not.
like the crazy rotation
Yeah,
stuff.
especially binding and forcing a rotation where it's not meant to be. You're not supposed to be turning your low back to one side severely. Um, so counter rotation, things like that. But the strength training was coming in, it was getting funky, and people were coming up to me and sharing their stories about just from class, like stable sacrum, shoulders healing, this and that.
Mhm,
And so, but over the years, though, it's gone deeper and deeper into gravity work, where now my primary mode of practice is gravity work, meaning I'm hanging, I'm pulling and pushing in gravity. I'm on the ground a lot too, as you know, with embodied keys, but the tone is through and through both practices. So, with regard to function, let's lay down a few variables. So, we want, first of all, is look at our bones, look at our joints, and what is that actually like? Where did that come from? It came from a much more diverse way of moving in the wild, in various ecosystems all over the world, just different geographies, over a very long period of time. And we evolved with range of motion in the rotator cuff, the hip, the knee, in such a way that was a way of life, like the rest of our mammalian friends, right? And yet, over time, somehow we've gotten so specified and specific and even isolated in our movements, as a way of focus that we've actually lost the coherence of the organism.
Mhm.
And I remember back then in the day when we were getting more and more funky, and um, so many incredible practitioners in Santa Fe of various modalities were coming up to me. And I remember one, Serena Shelley, she comes up to me at the front desk. She's like, "Sean, do you know what you're doing in class?" And I'm like, "No, can you please tell me?" she's like she's like, "This thing that you're doing with resistance, it's like it's pendiculation." And I'm like, "It's pendicu what?" And she explained, and she's, a multimodality practitioner of all these different things, and was just pointing me to work that was done by Thomas Hanna years
Mm,
ago in somatics with uh, using the term pendiculation, but really translated as really engaging the entire being in something based on the context of what it is that you're doing.
mm,
So that was the
mm,
seed that has continued to blossom into what I can say about stretching
mm,
today. um, and other people too, acupuncturists and rolfers and massage therapists come into class, not really talking about why they were coming to class, but there's something going on. And now I think it's everywhere. Now there's much more widespread awareness across multiple movement modalities. And yet I just want to focus on this, more deeply. So I think the issue came about when the function of long tissue, let's just call it a stretch for now, was separated somehow from its function as movement in general. So,
mhm,
for example, when we bend over to pick up something off the ground, we're usually conditioned by the fact that we live in a protected environment. We have level floors. We may or may not have shoes on. If we've been to yoga class or some kind of stretching modality, we're probably going to keep the legs straight, bend down, pick it up, and stand back up.
mm,
That's actually not very functional. And so it was starting to understand and realize, like, what is function? Like, do we even know what that is anymore? So the back line of the body, we focus, let's call it the focal point, the hamstrings, right? We actually go for that stretch in the hamstrings. Oh, that's my tight back. And that's, it's true. But what Thomas Hanna showed, as you know, as you well know, just a quick review for anybody that's listening, is that when you pull on the flesh, let's say you're lengthening the hamstrings, and the runner's going to go out for the run and they throw their leg up on the guardrail or whatever, they do that hamstring bounce. It feels great. I mean, I did it for over 20 years. It's like, oh, this is amazing. And we'll get back to that. But they go
please.
for, yeah, they go for the run. It's starting to rain. Go for the run and feel great, and they come back and get in their car and drive home or just walk back to the house and sit down. And what tends to happen, they showed this scientifically, right, is yeah, so the tissue, let's say it starts out at length X and you stretch it and it's X plus something. You go for your run, you come back, it goes back to X and then recoils a bit at X minus something.
Mm,
And that's actually seen as a state of trauma.
mhm,
It's, I think Thomas Hanna calls it the stretch response, right?
mhm,
So
mhm,
this is only because the muscle tissue is, I mean, it's more complex than this, but to simplify, the tissue is stretched without the context of knowing what it's doing. That tissue should stretch only while moving functionally, doing something like sprinting,
mhm,
lunging, uh,
mhm.
playing, tumbling, you know, like we do when we're kids. Like we look at our other mammal friends and they don't say to each other, "Excuse me, the cheetah is going to go after the gazelle." It's like, "Hold on a second, I need to open up my hamstrings."
I
No,
love that. You always talked about it. I love that.
it's just stalk, pause, ready, go. And so I think, and actually we can talk about age too, chronology, but like there's something that's timeless about if we're functional enough at any age, and we're going to start laying these parameters down here to understand this. We put the stretch, let's call it, let's turn the stretch into, let's say it's eccentric contraction, right? And for anyone listening, like the difference, it's often confusing between concentric and eccentric. Is eccentric is the tissue is lengthening under load, under natural resistance. It's holding space for itself. It's taking responsibility for itself. And borrowed from, like Tom Meyer's work, the hamstrings are part of the superficial back line. So there's a whole chain, a whole continuity of the back line on either side of the spine that the hamstrings are part of. So we can't separate these things and we have to include them. So when we take the stretch, again, the stretch that we're going to point to and lovingly support the change of isolating the stretch, which I think we're not talking about every yogi, okay? We're not talking about everyone stretching. There are lots of people that are very strong in their stretch. I remember Tias was talking about long and strong. John Friend.
Yo, Pilates calls it stretch through strength.
Yeah, yeah. I say in class, like at least 15 times this morning in class, tone the stretch.
Mhm.
So to kind of to disengage from the addiction, which the endorphin addiction to stretching because it feels good. So let's talk about why it started, right? I feel like, at least in the yogic context, it's such a gorgeous thing to start to sort of lovingly pull apart all that tension that we tend to carry or we've inherited. And it's a great way, whether we call it, vinyasa or yin or yang yoga and all of that, so those are side conversations. It began as this way of like meeting the state of, I'm going to say the state of kind of perpetual low grade freak out. You know, there's so much complex tension in the human dynamic that's coming from stress, from all of the variables that are dysfunctional, lack of sleep, our nutrition, our microbiome, all of the countless things that are part of it. We get to this place of like, okay, well, all we can really do, and this is something I really wanted to bring to this, is this major pivotal difference between treating things symptomatically versus functionally. Okay, so when we treat a symptom,
It just
yeah,
one
that's the
little bit.
fix
You
me.
just
That's the fix me.
yeah,
This
yeah,
hurts. It's
yeah,
hurt for 12 years.
yeah.
What do I do? You go and you stretch. It's like, oh, like the runner, you get some reprieve for a little while, which is why but because it recoils and some, you have to keep stretching. So, and other side effects over a long period of time is that the body starts to decelerate. It loses its spring and its coil.
Yes.
Not everyone,
Do you
but you're
feel
not going
like
to.
that because of that stretch that the tendons actually get more brittle and more dehydrated or
I,
stiffer?
I feel like, yeah, I mean, you can have, if you overdo it, you can micro tear and things in the tissue. But more than that, for me, it's pulling apart the things closer to the bone. So it's getting to the ligamentous body. The joints begin to be too disorganized because they lack a certain tone. Ligaments are not, I mean, they're very strong and they do stretch a tiny bit, but they have a certain integrity. Moreover, the joints and the ligamentous matrix within the joints have a certain like synergy together, all of the ligamentous tissue, but it's more than that. It's the skin of the bones, it's the periosteum, it's the tendinous blend into the skin of the bone. It's the whole collagen body gets pulled apart to open, and it can be seen as being something desirable. So
Is it, I mean, I'm wondering, I mean, I looked for that stretch in the more beginner stages of my movement career or even just moving. I was not a mover really. I started moving when I was like 30 some years old, moving like Pilates, yoga, whatever. But that was kind of, is it like this? Oh, I feel something. Oh, great. I'm feeling something. I'm feeling a stretch. I'm doing something right here.
yeah,
I, I feel like that was what something that was encouraged in a way. Like go
well,
deep, go to the edge, go and push it a little bit more.
it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good. And it became I'm just translating my own experience. I don't want to project this onto everyone else. Everyone has their own unique experience, but stretching became a way, a map, and a journey into, it's like a personal vision quest into me. And where I found the patterns of tightness and tension, I'm like, oh, I need to look at that. It's all about dissolving tension, which is fantastic. But what's interesting is it comes at a great cost. It can come at a great cost. When we look at symptomatically, we're treating something more in the Western mode, right? Treat the symptom, not the root cause. When I discovered that the root cause is actually disorganization of the body rather than just the root cause of the tension, right? It can show up, as you know, many, many, many ways. But when you work with enough people over enough time, you start to see very common, simple patterns:
Mhm.
fear, grief, where they end up in the body, kidneys and lungs, respectively, as a good example. You start to realize,
Sure.
okay, okay, so we stretch, we feel good. It's like there's blood flow,
Mhm.
you know, there's spaciousness. Oh my God, this is amazing. I'm coming back tomorrow. And then after enough years, I noticed, okay, my body's spacious now. Great. But why do I feel so sluggish? Why do I feel so slow? Why am I not strong anymore? Is it my
Mm.
age? No, I was like 47 at the time. It's like 10 years ago, right? And that was the call. Like, get the dowels out and make something pull. I want to hang. I want to like try a pull up. I can't even do a pull up. I'm so weak. And I was like, whoa, something is amiss, you know? And so, and going, you know, recycling this part of the conversation is the tone of the strength. As soon as it started to build, started informing the groundwork of the yoga until I let it go completely. But what I'm getting at is I started to understand more about human function. Okay. And going beyond the metaphysical and the spiritual aspect, which are so juicy, of like our primal function is to just be, to be emergent, to come into existence, to be present, right? Essentially. Um, if we put ourselves back in the wild in a diverse, dynamic environment, we have to really know our bones without the intellect. We know that what all the other mammals do automatically, we have studied and we have analyzed and we've picked it apart. But when you look at function, you realize, oh, the human body, and this is what was said to me by Serena Shelley. She's like, from this particular podcast, I forget the practitioner and the modality said that the human body is not designed to stretch, it's designed to move. And she's like, that's what you're doing. You're moving now. You're taking a pose and you're moving within the pose. I was like, okay. So let's take it deeper. What does it mean? So let's just call it this. Like you have a bone geometry, right? Your skeletal geometry, and it has its own stories and traumas and inheritance and such. And it's surrounded by this complex, beautiful dance of relationships. So that you have a front body, you have a back body, and they're in relationship with each other. And you have two sides that are in relationship with each other. You have spiral bodies, you have a central axial body, all the ways we try to study it, but it's really just this super complex celestial dance. But when you look at it, you break it down, okay, bicep and tricep are partners, or the front of the arm or the back of the arm are partners, the medial and lateral arm are partners. They're never not in relationship. So, how can you have stretch without strength? How can you have softness without organization? How can you have softness and strength at the same time? So, where it kind of went a little sideways and has come back around is that we have separated the stretch experience for good reason, but then it cost us slackness in the joints, slackness in the ligamentous body, unstable sacrum,
Torn muscles?
yep, torn muscles. Yeah, people
I've
getting,
torn my hamstrings twice
yeah,
stretching. This
and
was way back in New
right.
York.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, as an example, what is the shape of a fold? What does a fold actually look like? If you take a pose with Uttanasana and you keep your legs absolutely straight, often hyperextended at the knee, and you tip the pelvis forward and you have a back bend going into a forward bend. Okay, it's part of that is legit, but it's out of context. And you keep the legs absolutely straight. You end up focusing on the hamstrings, specifically the origin of the hamstrings at the sits bones. And they get tired and they're like, okay, that's enough. That's not the way we're meant to actually fold. You bend the knees, you drop your pelvis halfway to the floor, and then the spine can come down and investigate that special stone in the river that you want to check out. We also bypass squatting. Okay.
Mhm.
So this is more on the technical, logistical side of like, what does it look like? But the essence of stretch versus function is really about the tone. So eccentric contraction, of course, like lengthening under load tends to be 40% stronger than concentric contraction, where tissue is shortening under load. So, like a good example is that let's use that forward fold. You're standing up and you're coming down with your hands not touching anything. You're in eccentric contraction, really the entire back line. And then when you come back up, it's concentric, right? But both are under load. So the load, the tension is functional. It's built in. We've had hundreds of thousands of years and a lot more to develop through evolution this mammalian intelligence. When you look at your even your domesticated cat or dog in your case, they're somehow even domesticated, you know. Sometimes they're a little too much like us and they're a little too stiff, but I'm just saying, like, you touch them and they're strong, and yet somehow you could describe it possibly as supple, right? Sim
So supple,
So
so
supple.
he can fold into all these weird little places, but at a moment's notice, she goes for the rabbit. Like, it's
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, our cat Oli, he's on, he's like he can be anywhere at any time from the deepest sleep. It's like hilarious. Can we do that? I want to do that.
Yeah.
So also let's talk about range of motion because it's important. So that's one thing that yoga has really explored and many other practices have explored. You do it as well in the Pilates, but it's the range of motion is another seduction of like, ooh, how flexible are you? So the flexibility had to succumb to the range of motion. Okay. Are you there?
Yeah, something is oh, yeah, now you're back.
Yeah, it froze for a second. So these two are hand in hand. So when I try loosely to describe function, human function with regard to movement, I talk about ROM, like range of motion under a functional load. Is it naturally breathing? What's the function itself? Are we walking? Are we sprinting? Are we squatting? This is why, as you know, in body keys, it's this loose codification of like distillations of human movement. We're just in shapes. The shape of folding, the shape of sitting, the shape of supine or prostration, the shape of a lunge, of a crouch. So it had to get back to the function. And within the function, now you have the natural simultaneity of tone and movement. Tone, you're long, tone, you're short, tone, you're both at the same time, depending on what side of the body you're on. It's relational again. And so
And
when
you're
I
not
started,
strong
yeah,
in one moment. You can control your hamstrings, whatever, glutes,
yeah,
in any aspect of your movement. Because some people just, "Oh, I'm bridging. I'm just gonna do, like, 50 bridges, and I'm pushing my butt up to the ceiling," but that's not really functionality. Like, you're only strong in one of your glute area, if you are strong.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So the diversity is another piece. So they're all very synergistic. So we have range of motion under a functional load in a diverse mode of movement.
Yeah.
Okay, in a diverse, complex engagement. So, for example, another example like you just offered is plank. Plank
Mm.
static. Yeah, you can get strong enough to hold it for a while, but what happens when you start moving in it? What starts happening when you turn your body and twist?
Intelligent.
Well, and the core is not just the front. So we're such like, it's kind of all fallen into a bit of an isolated, segmented, fractured understanding of like, oh, go to the gym and isolate the biceps. Okay, that can be very helpful and intelligent, but it tends to, if that's all you do, it loses the biceps lose their sense of continuity with the myofascial reality of the front of the arm, which is,
Mhm.
like heart, pericardium, and lung meridians in Chinese medicine. There's a lot going on there.
Mhm.
What that thing's really meant to do is pull you up, climb, the biceps in a pull-up, unbelievable, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But anyway, even those movements, the calisthenics can get rote in the repetition and going for the progress of the linear mind. What I'm finding is the real healing, the deeper healing and coherence is in slowing down, engaging more, exploring the weird places you were talking about with the dog, exploring the uncomfortable places, but with enough awareness to take care of ourselves, to roll that ankle in the fold, but don't put all your weight on it. You're more quadruped, to explore the joints so we get to know our bones again. And how do I always talk about tracking your own animal bones? Because they're teaching us things, and also in myofascial conversations, bones are slow elastic. They change shape well into our 90s based on how we load them.
Yeah.
And that's like what? So when we isolate, we lose the continuity, we lose the coherence. And when Thomas, going back to Thomas Hanna, he would talk about sensory motor amnesia. Now it's all over the webs now. I remember when there was just a few sources when Serena had pointed it out, but the we just can't afford to continue to pull everything apart intellectually. It's valuable in its right, but it's not ultimately functional. In fact, it's been my experience. I just have to keep letting it go because I love the details. You know me. I love teaching anatomy. I love teaching myofascial and functional anatomy, movement-based anatomy, breath-based anatomy. And, it's more like it's funny because people get into class and they're like, And it was already happening when the weird yoga was still going. We still had a studio before I let it go. And during COVID, it became in body keys, and now it's whatever it is. People were coming to class and they were like, "Oh my God, this is kind of what I've been doing at home. I just didn't know if it was okay." Or it's like, I'm like, "Why aren't you doing that all the time?" Basically, and in 25 years of, this practice or that practice, and they're ready to release it or whatever, or inform it differently. Um, and so, yeah, so stretch by itself is a liability, but also as being too tight. I just think we've been going about it wrong, or not wrong, but a roundabout way. Let's just be fair and say that. So now, and it's funny because these couple of classes I just taught, I had people, we didn't really do embody keys. They were showing up their restorative
Did you
classes.
teach him? Did you guide him through like an asana? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, so they're both the restorative classes.
Uh-huh.
Everyone shows up automatically with a pile of props, which is cool. And I love props.
Uh-huh.
Used to love props, and now we don't even use a mat. But the thing is that, I was meeting them where they're at and softly coming in with like, okay, let's inspire a tonal awareness. So we started with the breath. And then we brought the awareness more from the superficial, which tends to be the front, into the deep back side body as well. In things like they all had automatically set up like a Salamba Matsyasana, like a supported fish,
Mhm.
on bolsters and everything. And I saw a lot of hinging at the dorsal hinge more than the opening of the chest and shoulder and the thoracic and cervical. And so just start with bridging, and maybe this is valuable to anyone who's listening who is a yoga teacher who is wondering, like, if they haven't left the conversation because the notion of stretching isn't maybe the best way, is well, isolated stretching is like too off-putting. I understand, but what we have to do is, if we take the current yoga practice, I'm sorry, we just tone the shit out of it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, like go. So like, remember how we used to do triangle? It wasn't triangle. We're like, okay, we're in down dog. Down dog is bent. Everything is bent and moving, and gorilla, monkey, whatever. Choose your
And I'm
animal.
not pushing my heart to the floor. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
back
It's
bending
not.
like a downward dog,
Well,
right?
yeah, and that's a whole thing. There's a lot of cultural human projection that moves into not just yoga, but a lot of performance-based modalities. They become performance-based and they look pretty, but are they functional? Do we allow ourselves to consciously slouch? Do we allow ourselves to, or are we always presenting the most pristine, back-bended, pumped, boobs and butt? It's wild. It's really wild. I'm fascinated with neutrality, and I find that neutrality is supported by the dynamism of diverse movement and its tonality. Okay. So anyway, these people were in class and I was like, okay, so what happens if you start to actually tone and drop the kidneys on the forward side of the bolster and just pull your body into every point of contact, including the bolster or block, your head tone the body, and let's hold that. And we generated it's so much heat. People are like starting to shake. And then we rolled out of that and just cleared the mat, laid on our backs, and you get to receive or get to really experience what that kind of activation does. So within function, there's ultimately, like, again, I just want to reiterate because I feel like it's really important to question our current practices, with the possible inclusion of, okay, range of motion is important, but we need to understand what is too much range of motion, but also track the bones. If we're doing a squat, for example, and someone's knees, ankles, low back, hips can't do a full squat with the heels on the floor, what are the progression steps from where they're at towards full range of motion under a proper load? And what's really cool is, in a relatively short period of time, and I've seen this work across a huge age spectrum, people can gain back range of motion much faster while healing joints, opening up that condensed, compressed low back, and many other things much, much more quickly through functional movement and finding variation within the function. So it's not like we're just standing and squatting and standing and squatting. That's a good beginning. But like, if someone can't go all the way down, give them a pair of gymnastics rings leveled off around their chest when they're standing to hold on to while they drop down. And there's often, like, and then the patterns show up of fear and trauma and like places they haven't allowed themselves to go because it's too scary. They didn't think they could do it anymore.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then by the time we're done with one session, they're in a full squat and cannot believe it, just to hold on to something. And now they've rekindled their relationship with climbing. They have to
Mhm.
pull themselves back up and
Mhm.
squatting. So there's the function under a proper load. Nobody's helping them except them. So there's something about it that's magical. It's natural. Same thing. And then when we get comfortable, let's say we're in, let's describe a bent Uttanasana. If you take Uttanasana, the standing forward bend, and you bend every joint, you bend the knees, you bend everywhere, especially between the ears, and you come down, and you like, and then the metaphor is like you're moving in water, right? So this is the one piece, this is the one variable, or I'll call it a technology that a lot of people can bypass on. And it is tricky. It's difficult to, because of sensory motor amnesia, what Thomas Hanna talks about with the break in the communication between the sensory motor cortex, the crown, and the map of the mammalian body's response. So the sensory motor cortex is the sort of microcomputer that runs the software of the communication neurally with the tissue of the entire body. Another way to look at it is the tissue and the neural net, which is an upside down tree, is feeding information to the brain, and the brain is processing it, and it's a loop. It's a reciprocity loop, or a circular economy, if you will. So anyway, what happens is when you bend that Uttanasana and come down, and then you start to resist your own movement. This is the variable that is the biggest volume knob for people, where a lot of people are like I got to see it yesterday. It's been a while since I've seen brand new people. I was subbing for the yoga class, and we were in essentially a bent Uttanasana, and we're moving side to side from the pelvis, right? And the whole body's moving side to side. And some people are jumping right in, oh my God, and just getting all kinds of monkey and doing like contact improv with themselves. And then other people are just moving their head and the butt's not moving. Okay. I was okay, cool. Shake your brain a little more.
Or the head is stuck like this.
Or the head is stuck and the butt's moving, which is actually better, but we want the whole thing to move as one from the pelvis, right? But how do you resist? How do you tone all the way around the bone? If you're stretching, if you're feeling this, the hamstrings in this bent fold, what you have to do is turn the hamstrings on. And then suddenly, and this depends on the person and their capacity to do this. And there's no hierarchy here, there's no judgment. I was one of those people. I couldn't get my buttocks to work for like a decade. I was realizing I've been doing yoga all these years and my butt, where is it, first of all? And how am I going to get a butt? It was not even on. No need to use it except in bridge or Urdhva
But
Dhanurasana.
Sean, I've heard a million times, right? In a bridge, release your glutes and lift your pelvis. I've
What?
heard that cue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So remind me, don't let me forget. Let's come back around to that in a minute. But you're in this forward bend and you're moving, you get into a rhythm of movement that is largely side to side. You can do anything. You go forward and back, but it's mostly side to side because most of our weight is in the hands and we're using, I mean, in the feet, but we want to get it more into the hands, bend the knees more. We're somewhere between a forward bend and a squat, and we're moving side to side in this kind of rhythmical scrub. Okay. And the capacity to resist or engage without, we use metaphors like moving in water, moving in honey, something more viscous. This is the big piece that without doing the actual gymnastics rings or going to the gym and doing things more animal-like, where that natural resistance is there, this is the piece about personal practice at home that can be challenging, is to resist even the head and neck, like resist everything as you yield, as you're supple, as you breathe vastly and wildly, and while you explore the nooks and crannies of places that you probably haven't been since you were a child, frolicking about. And it's a deeper range of motion than most dance. There's a lot of dance out there. Dance is amazing. It goes faster. Sometimes we move faster too. Sometimes we micro pulse. We bounce the pelvis in space, whatever shape we're in, or orientation and gravity. But the point is, the point of the finger is to function. And stretching is a great entry into, I feel, finding a way to unwind. And I was coming in from, even after 17 years of martial arts, I was like, I had tightness, and yoga showed me that. Had I known what I know now, it would be very different. It would be very different because it did cost me. It cost me my left SI was out
Would
a
you
good
have
solid.
ever, if somebody told you at the door, with what we're doing here with yoga, you're gonna also injure, you're gonna tear, you're gonna
Oh
da, da.
heavens, no, no,
Would
definitely
you've
not.
done it?
No, not like that. And yet I'm so infinitely grateful for the teaching of where it's come from, the Indian, the Eastern tradition and the spirit of it and the consciousness of embodiment.
Mm,
And I hope that anybody in any practice is realizing, if they're realizing that it's not functional, that the yoga can evolve. They practice. So here's what's fun. I'm experiencing more yoga, the experience of unity, of returning to become again and again and again source through functional movement than I am in 2 seconds than a couple of hours of stretching.
yeah,
It's more direct. It's just more direct because it's functional. And again, please, 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 I am not putting down anything. This is simply context.
that's just
Don't take
conversation.
it personally. I was there. I was there, and I'm like, what's going on here? Why are the sacrums weird? Why is the rotator cuff? Why can't people do Chaturanga Dandasana?
Yes. And
Why?
I've, I do Pilates, but I've had this time, maybe 2 years, a year and a half ago, where I had all these women walk in the studio, either with multiple rotator cuff tears,
Yeah.
with such sacral instability that they barely could walk without pain every step they took.
Mm.
Um, and they all had very, very strong Ashtanga practices, like
Yeah.
decades of 5, 6 times a week of over and over and injuring and re-injuring and re-injuring. And nobody ever said, hey, you know, where are your shoulders? What are you loading when you're doing your chaturanga?
It's really like a shift from, again, from symptomatic reality, treating ourselves symptomatically, get me out of this pain so I can continue with my lifestyle without looking at my lifestyle. Although even in yoga, like there's a deep reflection into the lifestyle because it's held in a beautiful context. It's held in a beautiful, you know, depth of teaching that is all about spirit and moksha and liberation. It's amazing. Will the practice evolve to support that even more deeply? Because there tends to be an attachment to the pose, to the destination, to the, to the protocol or the lineage even. But our lineage is evolution. Our lineage is much older than any of the systems, any of them. Not, again, it's not a hierarchy. It's just paying attention to how we're made. So when we move from symptomatic to functional, we start realizing that, oh, we must keep evolving, that our practices they can be effective at making us, or we're more healthy, we're more vital. We can choose that we can have the same choices in our lifestyle, but is it evolving or is it stuck on the symptomatic treatment part? And especially as people age too, because things become more narrow, things become more brittle, less pliable, less elastic, but for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so the evolution is really the shift towards gaining diversity and choice. It's really about choice, right? Where can the pelvis go in the shape of folding? Where can the pelvis go sitting? Where can the pelvis go in plank? Diversity is exploration. So it's just, we can let go of how we feel about, you know, the isolated stretch. Okay, yeah. So there's some responsibility that needs to be taken there if we understand why. And I think that's been going on for years. I think now this is like what, 20 years later. It's like 15 years later. And I'm seeing it all over the place. And also other modalities like strength protocols that are gaining range of motion again and losing some of the immense weight that people carry around with small range of motion, killing the body and pumping the body's inflated massive tightness. So that's the other end of it. Where do we meet? Where do we come back to function? So subtle micro variations and macro variations in all the joints, all of the micro corsets of the joints talking to each other It's all informed from movement and the tone within the movement. So that's why the gravity work has become so important, and how to bring some of that tone. So, for example, hanging, right, which you've done a lot of. We've done a lot of that, haven't we? Hanging, and you see this all over the place now. Even calisthenics people have been teaching for years are starting to look at just hanging as a practice, but how to hang.
Mainstream talks about like
Yeah.
your grip strength predicts your longevity.
Longevity and heart pressure and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a place we don't really ever go, for an extended period of time. And then what are we doing while we're hanging? What's the function? You can overdo it. So it's like, well, or you can hang only from your hands burn and scream and shout, and yet the feet are dangling like dead fish at the bottom of the line. It's like, turn the whole body on, move. It's a function. Okay, are we climbing? Put your feet on a ladder, then pull up. Okay, then you're strong, dangle one leg, a ladder up, we call it. Put one foot on the top step and pull yourself up. What is the bone space? What is the shape of the thing? It's all the same. Functional movement has certain parameters, okay, within that range of motion and diversity of tonality or proper load. What is the breath doing? Are we aware of the subtle energies that we gain? This is a huge, in like somatics practices and Feldenkrais and Alexander, and all these practices are informing a recovery of and return to an innate capacity to be much more alert, supple, strong mammals than we ever really have been in a long time. So you
Mhm.
see animal movement protocols, you see, all this animal stuff, and the knees over toes guy, and the strength side, and all these people are showing up with cool ways to come home.
Mm.
So long
Oh,
and strong.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, long and strong, short and strong, long and soft, short and soft are not separate experiences in the reality of function. Why am I starting to whisper and get close to the microphone? It's like late night DJ. Like, it's insensitive. It's sensitive stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I'm 57. I'll be 58 in September. I've never felt stronger in my life and more open. My hips are open. I surprise myself because when I do a quote unquote yoga pose, I'm like, oh my God, my hips are remaining more open. It's just incredible. Function is sacred, capital F.
It's
My favorite.
one of I think it's Perry Nicholson talks about it that mobility is granted by the nervous system. And I'm like, because if you're just hunting for range of motion or you're hunting for the, oh, I want a pretzel as well as the people next to me, you're just asking for something that's really not yours. But maybe, with strength, with ability, with breath, and I'm not even saying, we should be twisting our lumbar spine. No, I would not advocate for that. But
Counter rotate. Yeah. You turn
counter
your,
rotate, and
yeah.
then your strength will show you, or your ability to move, where can I be in that rotation, and not
Yeah.
just getting there to look or compete, on the mat. I mean, that's why I found myself that it was more like a competition, not in your class, but like generally it's lower, like, oh, what's everybody else doing here, rather than just breathing and experiencing my practice.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there. What was the statement? The mobility is granted by
Granted
the
by the nervous system.
interesting.
So if the
I would,
brain basically is in freak out mode because you're going somewhere, let's say too much range of motion, hypermobility, you're not strong enough for a particular thing. Let's say a forward bend. Most people, when they walk in and say, okay, do a forward bend, they cannot even do a forward bend because they're so deconditioned that their brain is like, oh, they have the neck up, like neck is still totally extended in their forward bend. They cannot even bend their knees, micro bend their knees, because they're now locking in their knees to stabilize. And this is how they're walking through life. And I'm talking, those are people in their mid 70s to mid 80s who have
yeah,
not moved.
yeah,
And but the moment they start to, coming, practicing, now like, wow, now I can actually let my head go. Now I can actually lift my kidneys up. Now I can actually bend the knees a little bit and flex in the hip and
yeah,
get into more into the ground. And
yeah.
that's why I'm like, yeah, it's really not, it's like this keeps us safe and it keeps us rigid if we have to be rigid. If the
Yeah.
strength is not there, if the range of
Yeah.
motion in the joint is not there.
Yeah. Again, so the nervous system is more defined by trauma
Mhm.
and and that kind of resistance and protection.
Totally.
But I don't know that I would love to flip that statement upside down. I would say that the nervous system and full liberation of the system is granted by mobility. The trick is knowing where to start.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's the problem. So what do you do? So if that statement is true, if mobility is granted by the nervous system, okay, I understand where that's coming from, but how do you begin? How do you how do you work with the nervous system without the mobility?
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
Right? So it's about, okay, so somebody is really, so I have a hero story, a client, Fenton, uh, in New Mexico. When I started working with him, he had just retired. He was like 83.
How famous that.
By the time I moved to Maui with my family, he had already had gymnastics rings I mounted for him in his living room and was hanging on them, doing all knee ups and all kinds of stuff, doing this whole protocol plus his yoga that we worked on for years, like 5 days a week without fail. And I think he's 92, 93, still going. And
Wow.
it's like, where did we start? Where did we start? Well, back in the day, it was yoga, but we started toning that yoga.
That's what I was gonna say, stability. You have to kind of start with stability and tone.
You start where someone is relatively comfortable,
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
invite a range of motion that's unusual for them
Yeah.
with themselves supporting themselves.
Yeah.
That's why the rings are really great, or you hold onto a doorknob, or you hold onto a countertop, or you hold onto something and you start to squat again.
Mhm.
You have to start in the lower body. You have to get some kind of range of motion to come back in the lower hemisphere. And so and it's that's why I ended up doing just this kind of amalgam of whatever it is. It's constantly evolving of groundwork and gravity work because they're the most direct. And remember that when we're quote unquote stretching or we're mobile, we're stretching more than the tissue. It's the neural, it's the vascular, it's the lymphatic. It's all moving and shifting. And when things are stuck together, this is all like Rolf's work, like stuck together. It's been sort of, it's numb in a way. It's like things are laminated that are not, they're supposed to be individuated and working together, not stuck together, confused. Are we one? Are we many? So that delamination process happens faster in functional movement than it does in any other way. Even manipulated on a table by a rolfer can really give insight, but you might get off that table after that 10th round and you don't even recognize yourself because you weren't proactive in it. So, and I love that touch. I love that. I owe a lot to the rolfing community, but I'm just saying functional movement tends to be, because it's proactive, it's about where to begin. If
Mhm.
someone can't bend down, let's go a different way. Let's play with the squat. Let's walk correctly. Let's do some locomotion work. And it takes time, but once someone starts to gain some momentum in that return to functionality, it's really exciting. They get really, literally years just are shed from their posture, from their
Yeah.
energy, from their mentality. It's unbelievable. Talk about yoga. I mean, incredible. So yeah, yeah. And I also want to add one more piece to that, is that the mobility and really the nervous system are inseparable. There's no sequence to it. If anything, because the inverted tree of the neural net is embedded in the tissue, it's sending all those signals up to the brain. But this speaks to a much bigger conversation about the top-down, backwards momentum of the cultural mindset of inverting the midline, which is terrible. Okay, top down. That's really where that statement is coming from, is that the mobility could be granted from the nervous system, but how do you address the nervous system without addressing mobility? It's not possible. And
Mhm.
if it is, it's somatic and it won't be in the context of the dynamism of movement. So, in other words, we can have all these practices, we can treat this and that, and we can have incredible insight. But if we don't put it together in our origin space of movement and dynamism, I feel like it just kind of, it can float on the periphery, and we can have deep moments, but there's something about it's integration. It's
Mhm.
reintegration. We have to reorganize the organism and not just do it here and there as a practice and then go back to whatever it is we're doing. We want to, the tonal body wants to carry its own momentum. It's meant to run on its own, all of these things. So when people talk about like opening their car door differently or slicing vegetables differently in the kitchen because they're doing it more
Totally.
like qigong tai chi mode without knowing those practices, they're like, wow, what's happening? I'm like, you're integrating a primal nature to something domestic.
Yeah.
What
People like
about,
bending my knees now when I brush my teeth. Good.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Doing one arm cartwheels while brushing my teeth. I'm working on that actually. Well, the one arm cartwheel. So what was it about bridge?
Oh, well,
Relax the,
relax your glutes
yeah,
to
yeah,
get into your bridge.
yeah. So I wanted to bring that back up because for me personally, to teach it, to kind of assimilate and to even try to share these things, I'm talking about things that are pretty elemental and primordial and borrowing from yoga dialogue teaching dynamics. It's really, really fun. I'm grateful for that because I'm trying to translate what's ultimately ineffable. And we can talk about it mechanically, but what's interesting is we have to get back to primal function of pull. What is a pull? What is a push? What is a reach? What is, traction? What is coil and recoil? I mean, we can call them what we want. But when you're in bridge, what 10 people tend to do is they rely on the quadriceps and push away from the feet. They're on a mat, right? So they're sticky mat. We don't use mats, right? We're using quad dominant because we're front body dominant in our culture. This is a general observation. The quads, we're pushing away from the feet, pushing back into the chest, compressing the low back while we're lifting the pelvis. And relax your glutes and then do what? Lift your pelvis? How?
I know.
So bridge,
I know.
bridge in a
I've
functional,
heard it recently on, since I still
yeah.
dabble here and there. I do my
Well, and then
thing.
there's people are
It's like,
still tucking the tail.
oh, totally. Oh, chair pose and say, tuck your tailbone under and go into your chair and then lift your arms up, basically.
We could do a whole other conversation on the pelvis, tucking the tail.
You should.
Don't
Absolutely.
tuck the
Yeah.
tail and why. And we can talk about pull and push. So just to give this context, the bridge became invaluable to me because it's one of the few places without gear to hang from that you can do a proper pull, where you're pulling. Pulling is equivalent to sprinting, to climbing, especially climbing. A squat is actually a pull the whole
Mhm.
time down and the whole way up once you're properly oriented in the back line and then the hamstrings and buttocks. So in the without a mat, especially if you do a bridge, first where the feet are pretty close together, knees pretty close together for a wider sacrum and pelvic floor, you want to pull the feet straight down into the center of the earth to lift the pelvis, and that's the hard part. And if the buttocks are offline, it's very difficult. So, and the hamstrings, of course, too. So the whole back line continuity has to come online. And so we pull. So one of the things that we do to inform that in body keys practices is we actually, in the shape of bridge, or it's really supine. We're exploring the supine experience, the pelvis off the floor. And we move the pelvis in a huge circle, or maybe spiral in as we rotate, spiral into the very center, and then reverse it and come back out and these complex circular movements, all while focusing on pulling the shoulders, pulling the arms, even pulling the head without crunching the neck, and pulling the feet straight down. Then you get the burn in the back line, and that's what turns the glutes back on. And we actually, as you know, through my entire practice, the glutes are a focus, buttocks and belly, without just trying to squeeze it. It's just to be aware. The low band of the belly, transversus abdominis, and the glutes in general, just coming back online as the trunk of the tree. Um, yeah, yeah, pull, and then plank is a push.
Mhm.
A push up is a push. Sometimes they're live within each other. You can pull yourself down in a pull up, in a push up. You can pull
If
yourself.
somebody can't do a push up, do a pull down.
Well, it's an orientation to, yeah, to the back, to the other side of the relationship.
Yeah.
I saw this in this brilliant Russian young guy, calisthenics guy was talking about in every movement, whether it's a push or a pull, do the opposite. Like bring the other aspect in. The awareness is priceless. To
Mhm.
pull yourself down in a push up doesn't mean you're smacking your face to the floor. It means you're going slow, but you have the rhomboids are engaged. You're actively retracting the scapulae on your way down, pulling yourself to to the push-up because the chest is in this massive eccentric contractive space, right? Wow. And that is what heals shoulders and also getting the tension out of the neck, the poor neck and the low back, especially since COVID. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah, the head and neck shoulder complex is just a mess. And actually why gravity work is so important in that.
Yeah,
Turning
I
the
mean,
head
the
forward
rings
under
did
load.
change my shoulders. I mean,
Yeah.
it's changed. I mean, it's still changing.
Yeah.
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 So,
So yeah, the tone. So really, this is all about tonifying and playing with not just being on or off, but the many, many subtle hues and textures of being subtly on and completely on. Okay. And realizing that when we've shifted our tonal baseline, when we lay down, because as you know, we'll get in 3 to 5 minutes of movement or whatever. There's no time on it. Sometimes it's 12, 15. And then we lay down and we just feel. We
mhm,
just feel. And this goes back to the mobility by way of the nervous system or the nervous system blossoming by way of mobility. Is that when we go into a relative stillness, lay down or whatever we're doing, resting, we're allowing ourselves to feel how this deep functional rhythm and engagement affects us. And there's a hum, not a neural hum, but like a resonant hum. There's the unity field, the flush and rush of circulation, of neural freedom, of lymphatic movement, of craniosacral tides moving again, of the osteo pulse. I mean, all of these things we could say, but it's this extraordinary feeling that later on you're feeling it while you're engaged.
mhm,
While you're doing the thing, you're feeling it at the same time. And when you're laying down, your nominal tone shifts. That's why I brought it up to where you're not, you could be completely relaxed, but you're not slack. You're
mm,
that cat,
mm,
feels like gelatinous, this gel state, not falling apart, but completely whole and completely relaxed, has a strength to it that you can feel. And even now, I'm starting to feel things coming online in ways like in the corset, really the whole body's corset, but like especially the lower torso, unbelievable. It's incredible from the tonal exploration in the diversity of movement.
yeah.
I don't know what else to say. I mean, I've said a lot, but it's like,
No, it's great. I mean, this is like do you think though, I mean, does it take a certain, this is like a weird question maybe. Does it take a certain person? Can anybody get there
oh
to
yeah.
that exploration, to that? Because I feel like people are so removed these days. Life happens on your screen and life happens more and more virtually, that there is such a removal from feeling, from allowing to feel, from allowing to relax, from allowing to just not just seek for the stretch because that's the only thing that you're able to feel, but the subtleties, that micro adjusting, that deep being held with your own muscles.
I think when you look at the profound density, the incredible, like ineffable depth of density and stagnation and lack of movement and lack of choice that we, and I'm generalizing, have culturally, even globally now fallen into by ways of all these things that we don't really need to talk about. It actually puts into perspective how superficial an isolated stretch really is.
Mhm.
Because that's, you're just tugging on a thread.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool, great, beautiful. So, yes, the answer is yes, people can go there. But the thing is that I think the greatest leap is for people to have an introduction, a proper introduction to movement where they're at in that stagnant place. And it may take some time, and a lot of people don't, because honestly, it's very easy to accept the fact that we don't need to. We don't need to get down on the floor and do our work. We don't need to, we have countertops. We have, we have all the things to make us conveniently comfortable. We have an allopathic Western medicinal system that's very good at certain things, but the overall vibration of it is symptom-based treatment.
Yeah.
Nothing about root cause. It's great for
It's not about
bone.
healing. It's not really about healing anything.
No,
It's
it's
more about
about
patching something up that's
patching it up. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, more full hip replacements and knee replacements are the product of lack of movement than they are anything else.
That's if you were one of the first people that if you pull that femur head because you're sitting, you pull that femur head out and up, and there is no and one of my teachers, Irene Dowd, would talk about bones need to talk to each other. They need
Yeah.
to be together. And if there's no demand of bone moving with bone, then the bone disintegrates.
Yeah, that's right. And that's so the same guys, I think it's the Schultz author Schultz, I think it's more than one. The Endless Web, it's a myofascial book. They did some studies about bone density and they found that well into our 90s, bones change shape and density, right? Based on how we load them. I mentioned it earlier. That changes very quickly. And they showed it well into our 90s, which tells me that we're supposed to be fully functional way beyond what
Way
our
until over
culture
100.
suggests. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's pretty wild, right? It's pretty wild. So yeah, so that I think anybody I know, and I've seen people do it, it's just the leap of faith it takes to like
Mm,
people are like, you know what? No, about nutrition too, about the microbiome and gut health and intuition. Like I'm good. I don't. I'm comfortable. I got the hospitals right there. I can go. I can do all the things. And now you got people hacking and trying to live to be 200, and they're still not functional.
no,
So it's an interesting play. Ultimately, it's a play of the spirit and the distortion that egoism,
yeah,
how it disrupts. You know,
yeah.
um, that'd be a fun conversation to have. Honestly, this is bringing up all these inspirations. This one conversation about stretching. So yeah, what is a functional human? And we all have our own relationship to that and choice. And what I find is the diversity of movement, the diversity of being a relatively balanced mammal is it can't not be spiritual. It can't not be a deep orientation to what all of these many practices, Buddhism, they're all pointing to. When people ask me what I do, because I can never describe it, I usually just say conscious embodiment. Oh, okay, well, what? Okay, cool. A lot of people talk about that. There's even like, a system, conscious embodiment.
Really.
Bless you for owning that. That's cool. But the diversity of being emergent as a functional part of nature requires that diversity as constant input and never really becoming complacent, always remaining curious in exploring ourselves and our environment and to be able to adapt, to continue to evolve. Have we paused evolution? Have we devolved? I know there's a lot of conversation about that, but and I find that the spiritual experience is much more rich and much even more deep than I could have ever imagined from being in this gravitational awareness, this teacher of gravity, the teacher of the elements, the teacher of the Mother Earth, and tone. Like, how we in the body keys, the metaphor got so crazy. Like first we're moving in water, then we're moving in honey, then we're moving in clay.
Play.
Now the clay is drying, and I borrowed that from a beautiful sister in Santa Fe who's a dancer, where they would actually slow down and tone to the point where they would the clay would not, it would just dry and you couldn't move anymore, but you
Whoa.
maintain the tone. But then
Whoa.
go beyond that
I'm gonna
and
borrow
actually
that.
move the earth with your hands and feet, reciprocate a
I
little bit.
borrowed that from you. I'm like, like you push that thing, right? That thing.
Pull
You
and
push
push,
her. Yeah,
pull and push,
yeah.
and use your entire strength of that builds the tone. It's a metaphor until it's not. When the metaphor becomes something that informs a tonal presence, that's legit, that's real. And there is the medicine, is the tonal, and
But
then the
that
bones.
and but also that the work. And this is kind of the thing that where I mean, people like, oh, you want that pill, you want to get your whatever to get skinny all of a sudden. I'm not gonna say a word. Like it's like there is no work, there is no friction
Yeah.
anymore. There is no suffering is like not in. Suffering is definitely not a thing. I just came back from a
Well,
ceremony um yesterday, and you know, you get into a sweat and you're gonna be on your hands and knees when you crawl into that sweat and when you crawl out, and you're not walking in the Temascal. You don't walk in a sweat lodge, right? You
right.
on your hands and knees. And this woman, she's like on her, I was like, no, go down onto your knees. You're gonna, oh, but it hurts my knees. This
Yeah.
is a 40-year-old woman, right? Like, yeah, it hurts her skin. It's like, well, it's okay. You can do it. Like,
Yeah.
this is part of respecting nature. It's part of respecting certain ways. We can put that aside. But also this complacency and this, like, oh, but it hurts. I don't really understanding that you need to break muscle to make muscle. There needs to be some sort of discomfort for you to get stronger and for you to mentally deal with whatever is showing up.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because I think it's like a really good example of how to meet that because that reactive response that they're used to not being comfortable in their environment, even a cush environment. And I'm
Mhm.
sorry, but like a sweat lodge, being on the dirt, like that's relatively comfortable.
Yeah,
And
that's what I said to her. There's things in here that are way worse. You can do this.
And
Anyway.
so, with regard to stretch and mobility, what's really incredible is that, again, when someone reaches that threshold of what everybody has a different pain threshold or what they would call pain, that hurts, right? That's the statement, the generic statement, and they bounce off of it hard and just change trajectories. What we do is we don't, and I say this all the time in class, we don't want to avoid that edge and we don't
Exactly.
want to push that edge.
Exactly.
What we do is we engage at that point of, I don't know about this. If I can get someone to get themselves to engage there, that fine razor's edge of discomfort
And
starts
breathe
to
with it,
yeah,
right?
but well, of course, they show up and they show up themselves proactively. Then what is this thin razor's edge of a place they can't go beyond becomes wider,
Totally.
becomes spacious. They start to move in and out of that comfort zone until they don't realize they're doing that anymore, and it becomes a play space. So they are exploring the edge again without pushing egoically or avoiding egoically. And it's alchemy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. That's where the healing is, like right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of the deep exploration of joints without focusing on flexibility, when joints are at range of motion with proper load, it's that last 5% of the range of motion at the bottom of a squat or it's the very bottom of a pull-up and the very top of the pull-up, this last 5% on either end, the bookends, that's where the medicine is when it's under load. It's not where the medicine is if it's slack and just stretched.
Totally.
Joints do not like it. Bones get too close together when they're not held in right. Or so something that came in a while ago is that strength is more about organization than anything else. Strength must be spacious. We could take this into the masculine and feminine another time, but like strength is all about, it's not just young. Strength is
Oh,
just,
yeah.
it's organized nature. And
We
then,
can't just have one thing.
no.
It's
And
not
then
gonna
within
work.
that, bones are actually farther apart where they need to be. They're closer together when they need to be. There's more breath. There's more possibility. And within possibility, potentiality, that's our function. What's possible in this moment of all of the abundant possibilities flowing up through the midline? What takes shape right now, whether it's just the awareness of it and meditation and the breath, or it becomes some kind of movement, some kind of art, not art as something you make. The craft of channeling is the
Mhm.
art. So, yeah, and it has to be a harmonious, simultaneity again, the unity field of tone and spaciousness.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's
Right.
function. Everybody is functionally a channel. And a monkey and a dragon and a dragonfly and a butterfly and a frog and
Yeah.
you know choose your creatures.
Choose your animal. Choose your animal. Yeah.
Yeah, So I hope this was
Cool.
helpful. I'm just, yeah, it's been a while since I've gotten into this conversation. It got me it got me in trouble, a while back. It's like the human
I
body's not
I
designed to
wanna know a
stretch.
little bit about it if you wanna share, 'cause I'm kind of, I mean, I'm not meaning to, you know, create bad blood or bash something, but where you were still teaching yoga, let's say, but then there was a moment where you said, like, this was not yoga anymore. Did you get, like, did your community ostracize you? Did other yoga teachers talk to you and say, "Hey, what are you doing here, Sean? You know, you're just not even pure," and like, what did you run into that?
I would only really get in trouble if I would make the statement the human body is not designed to stretch, it's designed to move, which isn't even my own statement, right? That's come through in other modalities. I did understand these things. If I say that in the context of a stretching community, it can turn into something. What's so I got in trouble with myself as like I don't even need to say that. All we need to do as yoga teachers is just start slowly introduce understanding what's happening in our own practice. We start introducing more tone, more bend, crouch, then go into triangle with utmost resistance, then come right back out. Just slowly change the practice. My path was different. We were looking at leaving Santa Fe. Our things were in storage. We went and taught a retreat in Guatemala, where my partner is from, and so we went down there and we had an incredible. And then COVID happens, so
Mhm.
we were looking at living. We didn't know where, somewhere maybe Costa Rica, something like that. We end up going back in Santa Fe. That's where our community's at. Our things are in storage there. Housing market is sideways. Everything is crazy, right? And I keep teaching, but what's interesting is then we went to Guatemala again, and I was working with this beautiful sister in Canada that I met in LA, a month in LA, trying to bring this. My timeline's a little mixed up, but like some of the stuff that I had started working on, the crouching, the shapes were starting to come in from embodied keys. They weren't there yet, but I had been invited. I was still teaching at the Annex in Santa Fe, and I was invited to go to LA and introduce some of this work to the acting community, to some acting communities, which is amazing because they do a lot of embodiment work and voice work. It's all embodiment. But anyway, what's wild is like COVID became this kind of pause where we weren't in public classes. Um, right before it got crazy, right at the very beginning, this is early 2020. I'm in LA and I'm working with actors at this prestigious acting school and having a blast. And we're doing stuff. It gave me the opportunity to not hold it as a yoga
Mhm.
value because people have expectations, right? I want to do downward facing dog. I want to do Janu Shirshasana. Cool, great. We're not doing that. We're doing something else. But so I was already letting it go. But this woman that I met when I was out there was like, look, let's do some sessions. I want to trade. She's like an entrepreneurial genius. So I was helping her move, and she was helping me with the ideas I might have around something new that's coming in. But it wasn't until she recommended a book called Energy Codes by Sue Morter, who was daughter of this. Both of them are like legendary chiropractors turned like super energy workers who really understand all of this stuff. But it was about Sue's sharing of her consciousness, the consciousness of her process, of her practice, and discovering on her own codes for translation. Listening to this, and my friend who pointed me to the book was like, "You've got to listen to this book. I've told you like 5 times. I'm not going to do another session with you until you read it." So we're having a family reunion in Guatemala, and I'm in a hammock and I'm listening, and I have my notebook. She's like, "Have a notebook next to you. You're going to need it." And it got to a certain point where it all just blew wide open, and I was like ready to let go of identifying as a yoga teacher,
Mhm.
embracing all of the gems, the countless gems and yummies from the yoga practice, from the culture of it, and everything I was speaking to before. And all of a sudden, the language came through of embodied keys, and I just started writing down, like, oh, it's basically, I was able to let go of identifying as a yoga teacher. But then when I came back to Santa Fe after that, and I had already started writing down, I immediately changed the practice. And we were in Zoom, it was online, which I couldn't stand anyway. But there was a period of time when the students were like, I want the old Sean back. I could tell.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to gush my gratitude for the Santa Fe community because all of
They
this,
trusted you. We trust.
beautiful souls knew that just 2 weeks with Sean, even at a yoga studio, things are changing, things are evolving. It was deconstructing for many years. And a lot of them jumped right on board, and it kind of paused for a while. But then as COVID started wearing off and I started teaching at Move in Santa Fe, the classes were getting bigger again and people were really into it. And it's been so amazing. And I miss that. I do miss that, the community, of course. But yeah, it was quite a journey. And now what I do, and I got a good little test in this past couple of days teaching yoga classes, subbing for a yoga teacher, is to just add a little bit of tonal awareness and then a lot of tonal awareness in things that they're used to doing. It
Mm,
changes everything.
mm.
Like we were doing before we let go of the poses themselves. So we're not posers, we're movers, right? It's that whole thing.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
anyway.
We're not posers, we're movers. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. You can
Awesome.
pause. Pausing is different than posing.
Yeah, yeah,
What's the
yeah.
difference, right? So, anyway,
Thank you.
yeah, of
This
course.
is good. Yeah,
It's fun.
let's keep it here and keep it open for
Yeah,
more.
let me know how I can support you. And if you want to, do more of this, let me know. But
It's
thanks
just
for the
it's
opportunity.
just conversation to, and I feel like people, when you said if I would have known what yoga is or does to my body, I would have probably not done it. And coming from a yoga teacher, this phenomenal yoga teacher, the golden boy of T.S. Little, if you will, right? I mean, you
Mhm,
were like,
mhm.
and then going into saying, no, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to see people getting injured, or it's all what it takes is like informed consent.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
and I just
you're stretching, this is what you're going for, but these are the consequences. And
yeah.
we're not informing people about the consequences.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a whole thing, right? Is the responsibility and the deeper understanding of the truth of movement and how we're made. And that's a strong statement, but there's you can draw the line. You can draw the line. And yoga is continues to be an extraordinary exploration. It is a great entry into something deeper, but is it taking responsibility for itself if it's not evolving and understanding function? And a lot of teachers are. They're totally figuring it out, and it's incredible. And I can't wait to see what they're doing. So yeah, but I just want to say also, like, there's no way I'd be at this point with this perspective, having not gone through 20 years of yoga formally. It's a perfect design.
Mm,
So, and we can inform as neutrally as possible and
exactly.
be actual embodied examples of as functional as we can be and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. Thanks. I'll talk to
aloha.
you. Aloha.